Welcome to the Oral History Podcast, which features stories from the oral history website voicesofoklahoma.com, where Oklahomans have given generously of their time to tell their life story for present-day listeners and for the generations to come. Our entire collection is available at voicesofoklahoma.com. By subscribing to our podcast, you will be notified of new Oklahoma oral history podcasts. So now listen to another interesting storyteller from voicesofoklahoma.com.
U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and is an enrolled member of the Muscogee Creek Nation. She is the daughter of a Creek father and Cherokee-French mother. Her father was a sheet metal worker from a famous Creek family. His great-grandfather was a Native American leader in the Red Stick War against President Andrew Jackson in the 1800s. Harjo's mother was a waitress of mixed Cherokee, Irish, and French descent. Growing up, Harjo was surrounded by artists and musicians, but she did not know any poets. Her mother wrote songs, her grandmother played saxophone, and her aunt was an artist. Those influential women inspired Harjo to explore her creative side. She recalls that the very first poem she wrote was in 8th grade. However, Harjo did not start to write professionally until later in life. She became a writer, academic, musician, and Native American activist whose poems featured Indian symbolism and history. Her poems also dealt with social and personal issues, notably feminism, and with music, particularly jazz. In 2019, Harjo was elected a Chancellor of the Academy of American Poets and became the first Native American United States Poet Laureate from the Library of Congress. She has also written several film scripts, television plays, and released 5 albums of original music. In 2009, she won a NAMI, Native American Music Award for Best Female Artist of the Year. Listen to Joy tell her story about her early years in Tulsa and the teachers who impacted her life. A presentation of the Oral History website, voicesofoklahoma.com.
Today's date is November 5th, 2020. My name is John Erling. Joy, would you state your full name, please?
It's Joy Harjo or Joy Harjo Sepulpa.
Sepulpa?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm married. It's my married name.
Have anything to do with the town of Sepulpa?
Mm-hmm. My husband's grandfather was the founder of that. They named the town after him.
Oh, we could do a whole story on that.
Mm-hmm.
Your date of birth?
May 9th, 1951.
So that makes your present age?
Just add it up. It's 69.
69. When I'm in this oral history business, it kind of gives me a little more confidence to ask a woman her age.
Yeah, I never wanted, I didn't ever feel like it was anybody's business. And people would always ask, and I'd say, how important is it to the story? At this point, I don't care.
Exactly, right. I'm in our office of voicesofoklahoma.com in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Where are you for this recording?
I'm in Tulsa at my apartment near the Oklahoma Jazz Hall of Fame.
And obviously, this is where you live.
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking right now about COVID. How has it affected people? It has affected me because I'm interviewing people by phone now. How has it affected you and maybe the Muscogee Creek Nation?
Well, there's a lot of it going on in the nation because a lot of people have kept up with, their church, and a lot of the ceremonial grounds kept going. We held off because of the COVID for safety. So there's been a lot of COVID going around. I try to stay in, although since March, I had a schedule where I was booked to be on the road almost every week, all the way through the fall. With COVID, all of those gigs got either canceled, postponed, or rescheduled as virtual events. But I've been out 3 times, out of town. We just got back from Phoenix for a socially distanced event at the Herd. But otherwise, I'm mostly staying here in the apartment, and I have a studio over on Archer and Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. So mostly I'm here or I go there, or we have some land south of Glenpool we're going to build on, and now and then I get out there. But it's kind of the space that artists live in anyway, except, I miss seeing family and I miss seeing everyone. But during this time, we've released a Norton anthology. I'm one of several editors, called When the Light of the World Was Subdued. Our songs came through. It's doing really well. It's already in its second printing, and Oprah just picked it for a book club selection.
Yeah.
And then I just finished, along with a team at the Library of Congress from the Poetry and Library Center, another anthology called Living Nations, Living Words that highlights contemporary Native American poets, and that also has an accompanying story map that will be up online. Mm-hmm. So I've worked on that during this pandemic and finished a memoir, Poet Warrior, A Call for Love and Justice, that will be out September from Norton, and just finished tracks for a new music album with Barrett Martin, and that will be out probably this spring.
You've been really busy. Where were you born?
Tulsa.
Your mother's name, maiden name, and a little bit about her background.
Wynema Jewel Baker was her maiden name. She was born in Decatur, Arkansas, right near the border of Oklahoma, Arkansas. Her dad was Desmond Baker. I don't know too much about his people. Her mother was Leona Mae Baker. Her maiden name was Evans. Her mother's name was Lena Evans. And my mother always said they were Cherokee, and had an aunt. She said when she went to the funeral, they were all full-bloods there for her aunt, her mother's sister. So I found out that my mother's mother died in childbirth, but I found a marriage certificate to her husband, Tom Christian. I guess he'd be my great-grandfather, who turned out to be an enrolled Chickasaw citizen. I have the copy of their marriage certificate in the Cherokee Nation. It's just that my mother is not enrolled and her mother wasn't, but she said they were Cherokee. So I've been tracking that down, and that's how I found out. And she had said both sides were Native, but I have not been able to exactly pinpoint yet.
Your father's name?
Alan W. Foster Jr.
Of what descent was he, and where did he grow up?
Muscogee Creek. His mother, Muscogee Creek. He grew up in Okmulgee. There is a house there, 21-room house. That's where the college is now, there in Okmulgee. Because there was oil money on his mom's side. They came from a lot of leaders. My great-grandfather, who I'm still close to spiritually, is Henry Marcy Harjo. His wife, or my great-grandmother, is Katie Manahui. I guess her grandfather was Manahui, who fought Andrew Jackson. And we're related on that side to Osceola, distantly, a distant uncle. My great-grandfather, Henry Marcy Harjo, was principal chief, an interim principal chief, and quite accomplished. That's what I know about his side.
How much of the Muscogee Creek traditions were taught you as a child?
We grew up in Tulsa, which has been confirmed that it's the Muscogee Creek Nation Reservation in an urban community with a lot of Creek, Seminoles, Cherokees in the neighborhood. But I didn't grow up like at the ceremonial grounds.
Yeah.
Although I'm a member and I'm participated now for many, many years, and family members are part of it. So I didn't grow up in the middle of the ceremonial ground tradition, nor did I grow up with the language, but I grew up knowing I was Creek and being recognized as Creek from day one. So.
Can you trace your many talents, poetry, music, writing, in your family heritage, and how do you believe that was handed down to you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the music through my mother, she used to write songs. One of her songs, Ernie Fields, the famous band leader and composer and so on, made an instrumental arrangement of one of her songs. I don't know which one that was. And she was a singer, but, had 4 children and then had to go to work. And so that all kind of went by the wayside, but she was very talented. And my grandfather, her father, I know he used to play harmonica, which I can play. I picked up, I can play it. And then it turns out my grandmother, Naomi Harjo, played saxophone. I didn't know that. I started playing saxophone when I was about 40, and my uncle, John Jacobs, he says, we might have your grandmother's saxophone around here, but we never found it. I didn't know that when I picked up a sax. But they were all artists on my father's side, and my children and grandchildren are all really good artists. Yeah, my grandmother, my Aunt Lois Harjo, who I was very close to, because my grandmother passed of TB when she was fairly young, when my dad was young. She was an artist. I have a painting that she did of Osceola here in my home, and I have a painting by my Aunt Lois, who used to go to New Mexico a lot. She was the one who taught me a lot. I was very, very close to her.
Any artistic talent that you have now, How early did it come to you?
I was always drawing from day one. I was always drawing and painting. The music thing, I loved music in school. And then I guess when I was about 15 or 16, because of my stepfather, I stopped all of it and then didn't pick it up till much later.
Because of your stepfather, you dropped it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. He forbid me to sing in the house. Usually I didn't sing when he was there anyway. There was no music because he was so oppressive that when he came home, everything stopped. Everything got quiet.
How long a gap was that in there that you couldn't perform at home?
Well, then I went to Indian school, and that saved my life. I went to the Institute of American Indian Arts when I was 16 and finished high school there. I loved it there. It was the Institute of American Indian Arts when it was a Bureau of Indian Affairs school in Santa Fe. There I was free. And it was the first time in school that I felt really like I had a place and I was comfortable, and I loved being there. When you sent in your application, you had to send in your art, whatever it was that you were doing. And I sent in drawings. I used to draw quite a bit, and that's how I got accepted. It was based on my art. My second semester there, I was looking at my schedule, and my best friend, she was taking drama, and I said I would never get on a stage. And then I wound up in one of the first all-native drama and dance troupes, and we got to go on tour up in the Pacific Northwest, and that was a highlight of my life. And then I turned out to be pregnant. I came home back to Oklahoma. My son was born at W.W. Hastings Hospital in Tahlequah. We were back here for a while and then moved back to Santa Fe for a while. Then I wound up going to school at the University of New Mexico.
Back to elementary. What schools did you go to here in Tulsa?
I went to Burbank Elementary until I think it was about fourth grade, definitely fifth grade. I was in Billy Mitchell. It was right before they put I-244 through there. It was right before they did all of that. And then Andrew Jackson Elementary off of Pine and Harvard area. Those were all elementary schools. And I think I went 1 year to Andrew Jackson. And then for junior high, it was called junior high then, I went to Cleveland Junior High, which I think is no longer there. And I went 1 year of Will Rogers, and then I went to New Mexico.
You obviously went on to then University of New Mexico. You started in pre-med. Was interested in that. You changed your major to art, but why, with all this talent, did you start in pre-med?
Because I got a job when I was in Santa Fe. I was actually working in a gas station, pumping gas. My then husband, my son's father, he always said he was looking for a job, but he would never find them. And we drove up in this car. It was a 1950s, early 50s car. I don't know, the trunk lid was always falling off into the street. But we drove up. There was a job at a gas station, and the guy who was running it looked at him and then looked over at me and hired me. So I went to work. Later, when I left to go take an 8-week program as a nursing assistant, when I left, he said I was the best employee he ever had. And after that, he said he was going to hire women. But I went to this 8-week program that the St. Vincent's Hospital was holding for nursing assistants, and I loved the work so much. I decided to go to pre-med. But after a semester in pre-med, when I was in classes, I had no preparation for like chemistry and so on, because most of my high school hours have been in the arts or just basic English and so on. I was in advanced English at Will Rogers. They put me in the advanced English class, but I went back into the arts. I've always been interested in the healing arts, and I still am, but I went back into doing art again. And then it was somewhere in my third or fourth year, about the third year as an art major, I was working toward my BFA. I'm within like 6 hours of a BFA in art, in studio art degree. I got into poetry, and then I changed my major.
And then on to Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from the University of Iowa in 78. And also took classes in filmmaking at the Anthropology Film Center in Santa Fe. So you're well educated for sure. And I'm sure that all that education, as you look back on it, helped refine your many talents.
Yeah, they helped, even if I might have fought against some of it. But yes, it did contribute.
Right. You're known as a poet, musician, playwright, and author. You were named the United States Poet Laureate in 2019, making you the first Native American Poet Laureate in the history of that position. So what does that mean, and what are the responsibilities that go with that? And let me just add, too, you were reappointed to another one-year term in this year, 2020.
Yes, well, it was certainly a surprise. The position is, well, it's an incredible honor. You know, it's really an incredible honor. I feel like I'm holding it, especially on behalf of Native poets and the history of, you know, it's like, how would I say it? By naming me into the position, I think it honors Natives. I mean, the position, it's a doorway for Indigenous peoples in this country. For me, one thing that's been really important about it is it makes a doorway for Native people. Yes. And highlights Native poets in this country. So in the position, the way I see it is I'm basically an ambassador of poetry, which is what I've been doing for years. I mean, I've been traveling about performing and speaking and writing for years, over 40 years, probably about 45. I was trying to figure it out the other day. For about 45 years, I've been traveling about. I've probably been to nearly every Native community in the country and Native communities around the world. And then I've been in every state performing, and this has been going on for a long time. So in a way, I'm doing what I've always done, but it's certainly at a much more elevated level to have that title to go with it.
Right.
I'm using it as an opportunity, of course, to highlight Native poets. So my project, which will be unveiled, that word doesn't quite work, in a couple of weeks, is a story map that will be at the Library of Congress site that will highlight contemporary Native American poets. I was in a meeting the hour before this interview with that staff, and it looks incredible. We have 47 contemporary Native poets highlighted on a map of North America. It's so beautifully done. You can hear the poets, read the poems. They have statements about place. So that's been a project. It was also picked up by Norton, and the poems will appear in an anthology in May, published by Norton. So we've been working away on that. I think I have about 3 or 4 more pieces to do. I'm going to finish them in the next couple of days, and then most of my work on that project will be done. Well, that part of it, because then there's going to be teachers' resources, and I'll be part of working with communities in some way with that project.
You are a fan of oral history, and so am I. That's what my series is on our oral history website. You use Native American oral history in your literature readings, musical performances. Explain your thoughts and why you are a fan of oral history.
If you think about how history is imparted to us in a society, a lot of it has been through books, you know, and who writes books and who publishes them. It brings up another whole question of who has authority and who's telling the story. But if you go to the people, and people may not agree, you know, you can have several people or even 2, 3, 4 people at an event, and they all might see something different. They might tell the story differently, but they're all viable, you know, living stories. I guess an example would be my Aunt Lois Harjo. There's a history of Muscogee Creek people, and I can read about my grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-great-grandfather. I think I'm the 6th generation. My Aunt Lois would have been the 4th generation. So she knew stories that weren't in any, you know, she knew stories about the Trail of Tears. She knew stories about Manahoe, about the family that really gave a lot more color and meaning to the stories than what you could read and what little you could find in books. And a lot of it is wrong. I mean, I found out that there's a lot, it's irritating. I've gone on that Ancestry.com, and somebody went on there and changed the spelling. Suddenly I could not find Manahoe. Some people say Manahoe, some say Manahwa. But suddenly my Manahoe relatives all disappeared. And then I discovered that somebody from Alabama who doesn't know anything about the family or the history went through and misspelled everything. Oh. It's like they kind of erased the story. And then if you go into different sites or textbooks, they'll say that he died in Alabama or that he died on the trail. Well, that's just not so. I have a map. There's oral histories that have been recorded in a book of, what is the man's name? It's about all these different immigration trails. With my book of poetry, American Sunrise, I included a map that shows the trail that he was on with the Fish Pond Nico, or the head of the Fish Pond grounds, and their families, where they started in Talladega, Alabama, and then they wound up, a lot of them was let off at Fort Gibson, at the fort there. I also know where he's buried. It's not marked. A lot of people don't know where that grave is, but I've been there, and it's not marked with a plaque at all, but with 7 cedar trees. Mm-hmm. But see, you won't find that. I thought, well, maybe we should put something there, but in a way, I think he kind of wanted it that way.
You've written many poems. I have 2 of them here I would like for you to talk about. The horse is an important animal in Native American culture. You've used that as a symbol in She Had Some Horses. I was looking at it. In fact, I have it in front of me here. In the first section, for those who haven't read, you know, of course, that you started every single line with She Had Horses. Who? Talk to us about the symbolism and how it expressed some of the hardship you went through and some of the values you have.
Yes. You know, poems in a way have their own lives. I can look at it now and see some of the, you know, impulse and what pulled it all together. Manawa was a horse person, as are some of my family members on that side. He was known for his skill with horses. My Aunt Lois told me that he could even get somewhere quicker than his warriors friends because he could bend time. But he was very skilled with horses. Another story that I told when I went to the University of Tennessee for an interview to be hired, I told them, and this is another story you won't find in a history book, that he used to steal horses. Well, it wasn't really stealing because the people were on the land illegally, but they ran all up and down that Tennessee River Valley. You know, the Tennessee River is sort of like I-40. You know, it's a major highway. So I told them that story. They hired me anyway. So I have a cousin who was quite a horsewoman and barrel raced in Okemah, Oklahoma. I was living in New Mexico when I wrote that poem. My kids were young, and my daughter's father used to make up a little song for her about horses. And then there were these Navajo horse songs that I've always liked, you know, horse songs for horses, for riding them, for traveling. So all of those pieces kind of went into the inspiration for that poem. And I also realized that right before I wrote the poem, it was when I was traveling down from Albuquerque to Las Cruces to help sew up the binding for my first little book called a chapbook, which is a small book of poems, not a full-size book of poems, that was being published by Puerto del Sol Press. I went down to help sew the covers. I even did the art for the front of the cover and did a few pieces of art inside. It was coming back, I think, from there. I was in my car and I felt, and I can even tell you on a map where I was, but suddenly it was like a vision. I hate to say vision because it sounds so hokey, but there was a horse. I just felt and saw a horse that I had known at some point, you know, in a dream. And it was a very emotional moment. And I realized later that it was probably when that horse poem started forming somewhere, you know, somewhere in the place that poems start forming themselves.
This is a rather long poem. How long did it take you to write this?
You know, when I was younger, I would not get up. If I started a poem, I wouldn't stop until I was done with it. I might tweak it. But that one, I mean, all of the ones that I wrote around that time, I might sit with it, but I wouldn't stop until I got the whole thing down. And that one came fairly quickly. I must have been working on it somewhere, you know, with all those pieces I was telling you, those inspirational moments I was telling you about. So then I just wrote it out. But then I revised extensively. Even from the first one, I've revised it some, and then I perform it. I've performed it. I have a song, She Had Some Horses, which is very recognizable. People love that song. It's kind of a reggae tune. Really, that poem kind of started my career, or at least visibility as a poet. There had been no poem quite like that.
This name I'm going to say to you is a name that I have interviewed for Voices of Oklahoma. And when I say the name of the symbol, you'll know who I'm talking about. He uses the symbol, the bear. Who am I talking about?
Oh, in Scott Momaday.
Right. He wrote an introduction for your book, When the Light of the World Was Subdued, Our Thoughts Came Through. It was interesting to note that you have that friendship with Scott Momaday and share some of the same writings in a way.
Well, of course, once you're part of Indian country, and he won the Pulitzer Prize, we all knew about that. We're all very proud of him. And then when I was a student, I guess I probably first heard about him as a student at the University of New Mexico when I took, I think, Gary Hobson, who is now a professor emeritus at the University of Oklahoma. He was teaching when I was a student there, and I took classes from him. It wasn't a native. I probably took one of the first native literature classes in the country one summer. I took classes one summer, and it was taught by somebody who was not native and probably knew next to nothing about native people. But Paula Gunn Allen and I were in that class. I think that's kind of funny. But I think when Gary taught, he's part Chickasaw, Cherokee from Arkansas. I think that's where he's from. Anyway, he taught, I probably learned about his writing from a class of his.
Oh.
Yeah, and read House Made of Dawn and The Way to Rainy Mountain. I've taught both of those books so many times, but I met him when I was a grad student at the University of Iowa. He came through and performed, and I think that's where I first met him in person.
Another poem that I'd like to talk a bit about, For Calling the Spirit Back. And let me say something about it. Some people can hear poetry and say, oh, okay, here's another poem, and maybe they're lost from the get-go or what have you. But this poem caught my attention because you grabbed the attention of anybody who's listening, whether they like poetry or not, because you begin like this. Put down that bag of potato chips, that white bread, that bottle of pop. Turn off that cell phone, computer, and remote control. Open the door and close it behind you. Now, who wouldn't say, oh, this is a poem. I'm going to listen to this. And it's a poem about your personal experiences, right?
That poem is a kind of a ritual poem. It's not necessarily about, I think a lot of people think poems and they're all about the person's personal experiences, but it isn't necessarily so. I mean, you have to certainly know about something, I suppose, when you write. But, it's just like you'd asked me that, and I didn't answer that quite, was She Had Some Horses. It's like you don't always know exactly what it means. It's just that you're following a sound sense. But the poem For Calling the Spirit Back is a kind of ritual. In the way that all poems are rituals, you have a title that brings people in. There's a intent in the poem, and you follow it. It's art, and you're using language and all the ways that you can use language and content to make a structure and to make something that might have an impact or that changes you. If you're an artist, you don't really know what you're doing. You're going towards something, and it's larger than you. So that poem started out, my intent was to make a poem to call the spirit back from all the sideways roads of addiction and in ways that we get lost from who we really are. That was the intent of the poem.
Do you write every day? Is there a time of day you write? Do you get up every morning at 7 and then start writing? Or what are your mechanics?
No, I'm not one of those kind of people. Obviously, I'm pretty disciplined, I do all these projects and I do a lot of public service stuff. Like the Poet Laureateship is public service, essentially. But I think it's important I do write something every day. I don't sit down and write a poem every day, although it's good practice. I mean, there is the practice of being human, with things we get up and do every day. There's the practice of being an artist. So it's important to keep that going. And part of that practice is writing. Part of it is listening. A big part of it is listening. And you can do that in any way. You can do it from reading. You can do it listening to poetry or looking at art, appreciating art, studying, even other disciplines. All of that is involved in the art of poetry. But yes, I'm always usually writing something. I wrote some notes this morning. I've been reading different things. I write notes. I got to listen to my daughter read a poem this morning on a radio station. You know, a poem that's taking Indian country because of the CNN exit poll that listed natives as something else. I don't know if you saw that. No, it was horrible. It said, exit poll for CNN, white, so many percent, large, like 64%. Blacks, said blacks. And then they said Latinos. And then they said something else. Can you believe that? Something else. And then Asian.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're being called something else. It is horrible. It's sort of dumbing down. And so that's all over. That's a blaze. She wrote a beautiful poem about something else.
Your daughter's name?
Her name is Rainy Dawn Ortiz.
You write about her in your memoir, Crazy Brave. Isn't that true?
Probably, and my son, too. And then I have a stepdaughter. Well, I have several stepchildren. But yes, her and my son, Phil. I wrote a poem, Rainy Dawn. I wrote a poem. Towards the end, there was a poem in there for her.
And that was a difficult story to tell about your daughter and the journey, which we don't have time to get into. But that story is interesting in the book, Crazy Brave.
I think that's one of the best written parts in there, is that little section.
Yeah. Difficult time for you. I was noticing on YouTube you were doing an interview, and I couldn't help but notice you have interesting tattoos on your hand and arm. They look beautiful. Are there special meanings? How did you come to having tattoos?
Well, you know, the Muscogee Creek people, we tattooed extensively before Christianity took hold. If you look at an image that my great-grandfather, Manaho, he's in one of the McKinney Hall prints, you can see part of his face is tattooed, and women tattooed too. And so I lived in Hawaii for almost 12 years with friends, mostly hung out with the Hawaiians there, and with friends, Keone Nunez, who helped bring back Hawaiian tattoo art. He was taught actually by a Samoan man who is a major tattoo artist. He did my first tattoos and the last one I had. The one on my hand I got when I went to Tahiti. I love the islands, the Pacific Islands. I've always have since I was a little kid. I got to go to Tahiti, which was a dream, and decided to get a tattoo there, and I kept seeing them on both hands. But after when we did one hand, I thought, that's enough. It was, you know, it's so intense, but there's stories in it. I told him why I wanted it, because there's a reason. You don't just, there is a whole reason. And there was a ceremony I did before going in. So in that design is part of my story.
Part of your heritage. And you probably had to tell these young people you weren't part of the craze that's on now. This goes way, way back.
Yeah, it goes way back. And yet I think it's something people have always done, though, I think.
How about
just let people loose without law? You know, people, it's natural. Body art is kind of a natural thing.
Yeah.
You just have to be careful, as I told. At Indian school, we would find things to do on the weekend. One weekend, all of us young Indian girls were taken in by the image of Summer Blonde on this hair color, so we decided to buy boxes of Summer Blonde and do our hair, and we thought we would look like casually blonde, and we all came out with peroxide hair. Another weekend, somebody started tattooing, you know, with ink and a pen. People were putting their boyfriend's initials on, and I said, you know, that's going to be with you your whole life. Yeah.
Right.
And I'm glad I didn't tattoo anything then. I thought about it, and I said, no, there's nothing I want to tattoo on myself forever.
You had wisdom at an early age, didn't you?
Oh, sometimes and sometimes not.
How about teachers in your life that you could name one or two that say, yes, I can tell you about someone who influenced me?
Well, my whole memoir, the next memoir, Poet Warrior, A Call for Love and Justice, is really about teachers and teaching. It's different from Crazy Brave. I mean, it's my voice, but it's a whole different stance about being at a different age and looking at over teachers and even moments that have taught me. One of my most profound teachers was the Pacific Ocean in Hawaii. I didn't write about that necessarily, though, and about the Pacific and racing canoes out there. But I've had some really good teachers. Some of them I didn't necessarily get along with. One of the first art teachers I remember was at Burbank Elementary School, I guess when I was there. That was when we had arts in school, and I loved it. I always remember her name, Mrs. Wattier, and she was very severe. I'm not defining it as rhyme. People were a little intimidated and frightened of her, but I really appreciated her because she was a good art teacher, and she kept the class together. There was so much time wasted in class, dealing with discipline. I noted as a kid, I used to think, why don't you just give me the book, like the English book or the book on math or whatever we're reading, and just let me take it home and I can have all this finished. I can get all these assignments done and have them back within a week or two. If it's really long. But, they wouldn't. I always felt there was just so much time wasted with discipline or having to go back over things. Yeah, at Indian school, I had a couple of teachers. Roland Meinholtz, who was our drama teacher. We're still friends. I saw him not too long ago. I went up to record the foundation tracks of my next music album that will be out this spring. It was the first time we'd seen people. We were all socially distanced and everything going up there. I'm still friends with him. He, too, was somebody who, there we were at Indian school, he really got us into shape, all these Indian kids. And most of us with really no training in theater. He whipped us into shape so that we became a drama company that people were coming out from New York to see. Jose Limon, the major dancer in New York City, came out to see what we were doing because we were using native forms, contemporary modern dance, and we were doing something very unique and different. But he whipped us into shape. Yeah. And that's what I liked. There was an integrity, just like I could still recognize integrity in second grade, with Mrs. Wattier as the art teacher. There was an integrity about it, just like my first poetry teacher at UNM. And we're still friends. In fact, I owe him an email. And there are many more. There are many, many more. I've had mentors. African-American poet Audre Lorde, Adrienne Rich. I wrote the poem By the Way for her. Major American poet who was a mentor. A lot of teachers I only know through their poetry.
It's amazing that you referred to all these teachers, but the first one you mentioned is from elementary. People who are listening to this and elementary teachers should take heart from that. They probably think, oh, well, when they get to be 60-some years old, they'll never remember this. But in your case, you did. Oh,
yeah. I think they're probably the most important. And people forget that. There's been such a devaluation of women and what's considered women's roles, which goes along with children. And that's the most crucial. I mean, if we all go back to our childhood, a day is forever. Everything has impact, has utter impact. And those teachers, I remember all of them. Miss Palisard, and I remember the kindergarten teachers. There was another teacher, too. This was in junior high who had a major impact. He taught physics. Junior high was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And it was 9th grade, and I was a good artist. My stuff was always in the hallways. I even did a portrait of John Kennedy that was in the hallway. It was really good, too. I remember we got our schedules. You had to get permission to get into advanced art. I was so looking forward to being in that class for 3 years. That was one of my goals. And then I get my schedule, and it's not on there. I was so upset, and I said, well, you have to go to the class you're scheduled and then get them to sign off, and then you can change it. Well, I went to this physics class, and I was so enthralled that I stayed. He was such a good teacher.
Wow.
I've written his name down before, and I can remember it. I know he's long gone, or I would find him and thank him. Yes, he made physics. We learned how to get to the moon, what we would need, and about rockets. We learned about weather, all kinds of things that I felt were useful. He was a good teacher, and I stayed. here was my dream of being in advanced art. And it was my favorite thing. I loved art and music classes. And there I stayed in that class. I had a sixth grade teacher who I could tell that she saw me as a human being.
Wow.
And there's something about her presence that I was going through all kinds of stuff. It was sixth grade, but I knew that I could walk in there and I felt somewhat safe, even though she sent me home once because I was wearing red shorts. She says, you got to go home and change, which I did. It didn't make me mad at her. I mean, I knew the rules. When I was going to school in Tulsa back in the 50s and into the 60s, I was the first girl in the school in fourth grade to wear boys' clothes, to wear jeans. You know, now everybody does. But I was the first girl in that school to wear jeans. I think that must have been fourth grade. I was at Billy Mitchell. I remember what it was. We went to get school clothes, and I remember it's fourth grade. I would get cold in the winter. We'd have these little dresses on, and there'd be sleet storms, and I'd have to walk to school. And I'd like to roughhouse. I'd usually play with the boys just because I would get bored and want to go run around. So I told my mother, and I was pretty stubborn. I told her I won't what my brothers are wearing. And to her credit, she let me do it. I guess she knew that I would have held that. Mm-hmm. She didn't want to deal with me. But I think about it now, I had on boys' jeans, even boys' shirts. These are much more comfortable. And they were made better. They didn't make girls' clothes as good. Yeah. I went into my school, and I didn't even feel weird about it. I just walked in. I was so happy. Maybe that's why. Because I could sit any way I wanted. I could get on the monkey bars. I could do things. And I didn't have to worry about my dress.
Did your classmates look upon you as, ooh, you're weird. Why are you wearing those boys' clothes?
At all, I think I started something. Like I was the first girl to wear bell-bottoms, too, in junior high.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that I think what it was my attitude. I mean, I had longish hair and all, but I'm sure that if I had looked more male, I would have really gotten hassled. Because that's how people are. They shouldn't be that way. You should just leave people alone. But, too, it was that I was just so happy. There was a dress code. You were supposed to wear dresses, but from that moment on, I got to wear pants. Except in junior high. They made us wear dresses, so I started getting creative in how I would make my outfit.
What role did the Tulsa Artist Fellowship play in your recent career?
Oh, that's great. Coming back to Tulsa, I was teaching at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. I had a chair of excellence. And I loved, it was the best place I've taught and great students. And they just treated me really well. But I had to come home. I needed to come home to be in my community. And then the Tulsa Artist Fellowship, I applied and got one. What's been great about that, it's given us a place to live. We're right down here in the Brady Arts District, which is cool. My favorite place in town is the Oklahoma Jazz Hall of Fame. They know me and I know them. I've rehearsed there. I just recorded a show for Oklahoma Music Roots program with 3 jazz musicians, and they let us rehearse there. Then I just finished recording a horn and flute track, and they said, you guys can come over here and record, but Tulsa Artist Fellowship, they're great. They have resources, and they let us use the storefront of the Guitar House moved. I guess they have other stores in town, and they closed the one on Archer. So we recorded in that store. I think starting today on that storefront is one of my new songs called Stomp All Night. All the lyrics are written on the storefront. So I'm going over there tomorrow to be photographed in front of it. But they've been great. I mean, the program, everywhere I go, even virtually, I've traveled a lot virtually. I've done a lot of performance virtually in the last month. People are asking about that program. It's caused international attention to what Tulsa Artist Fellowship is doing in Tulsa.
So it would be quite a unique program then in the nation. Is that true?
Yes, and that's what I was telling them. I said, I feel lucky in that I was at IAIA, the Institute of American Indian Arts, in the heyday where the whole contemporary Native art began its huge moment. It was a huge moment in Native art. I was there. in that moment, in that time, when I first got in this program, and I see it. I said, and now here I am. I come back home, and I'm once again in a program that is groundbreaking and is major. This is going to have major repercussions when it comes to the arts in this country and arts in a community, how a community fosters arts in Tulsa, in particular, in Oklahoma, and in a somewhat urban setting. I say somewhat because I've lived in Honolulu and been all over to huge urban areas, and I still think of Tulsa not necessarily as so urban, but like a large town.
And about your music, do you have 5 CDs or maybe more?
Well, I have a new one coming out in the spring called I Pray for My Enemies, and right now we have 2 guest guitarists. Mike McCready of Pearl Jam was going to play on it, and so is Peter Buck of REM.
Wow.
That will be out. I do voice, I sing, I speak, and play sax and flute. I had one track with native flute. I may have played soprano sax over that. I don't know if I kept any of the native flute tracks, but I play soprano and alto sax on it. So that will be out probably this spring. That's something I've got to get on.
Of all the people I've interviewed, I have never interviewed somebody who has so many different talents. It just oozes out of you. You probably don't take it for granted, but you step back and say, wow, am I fortunate? All the different things you can do. You're a great public speaker. I know you speak out on social issues. All these things coming from you. What a charmed, artistic life you're living.
Well, it comes through. I feel like I have a lot of deep spiritual help and a lot of inspiration, too. A lot of inspiration, arts and poetry and people, community.
We have a lot of young people who listen to these interviews. You must have some advice to either would-be poets, music people, or just general in life. What kind of advice do you impart to the young coming up?
I think it's some advice that was given to me probably when I was in my 30s, and then it reiterated at one point. It was from a Native woman from New Mexico, and I remember her looking at me and saying, just be yourself. When I heard that, it was like, well, yeah, I know how to do that. But on the other hand, I mean, it's like the whole jeans thing, being the first girl to wear probably jeans in public school in Tulsa. When you be yourself, it's not always that easy. Sometimes you come up against rules. It can be difficult to be the only person doing what you're doing. Mm-hmm. When I started writing poetry, people didn't always know where to put me. But I followed what was given to me to do. It didn't always make sense to me. When I said I was going to be a poet, it surprised me. It's a mystery that I became a poet, that I knew something in me as I began that. Even though common sense that people were saying, how can you be a poet? You better take education classes. You've got 2 children you have to care for. But something in me knew beyond reason that I would be taken care of because that was me. That's what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And that's important. A lot of times we get sidetracked by what we think other people think we should be or what society thinks we should be. I think we all came in with a kind of map. We came in, okay, these are things I want to accomplish. It even makes common sense. If you look at the plant world, even if you look at a family or the map of a family, there's a design. And some of us go outside the lines, mm-hmm. and some of us stay within the lines and make something incredible within that form.
Yeah.
And there's room for all of it. That's what characterizes this place, is an incredible diversity, and that's what makes its beauty.
Yeah. Well, there are lots of calls on your time, and I appreciate it very much. Looking forward to adding your story to voicesofoklahoma.com. Thank you. I really enjoyed this. I appreciate it very much.
Okay. Thank you so much.